Hello and welcome to DesignChat, the best live design discussion on the internet. My name is Ryan McGovern. I'm your host. On Twitter, I am at Hoobajoob and at DesignChat. Check us out on Twitter for all the notes about the show and also DesignChat links. We throw the links up there on Twitter also. Tonight, we have a very special honor of talking with IBM Fellow and Chief Scientist of Automation at IBM, Dr. John Cohn. Dr. John Cohn, thank you so much for coming. It is a pleasure to be talking to you tonight.
Nice to be here. Absolutely nice to be here. I'm here a lot. Kind of cool to be here.
You'll be here all the time now.
Yeah.
So a little bit of back history. The first time I briefly got to meet you was this summer at CUSP Conference, which was put on by Some Automation, which I am at their design offices in West Dundee, Illinois right now. And got to listen to you talk, and then you had to rush off a little bit. So I was able to get in. Luckily, I was able to get in contact with you after the conference and invite you to come talk to all the crazy designers on the interwebs. So thank you very much for doing that again.
Super happy. It was definitely the coolest I've ever been to be near all those ultra modern design people. I mean, I'm used to nerd, so it was really cool. I even got these ultra thick rimmed glasses just to fit in.
You fit in with the design crowd. I love it. Designer glasses.
I mean, it's great because you guys are emulating us 50 years ago. It looks great. Good.
It's very retro. It's cool. So I was going to read just a little bio because sometimes I forget things here. John Cohn is currently an IBM Fellow and Chief Scientist of Design Automation at IBM. Dr. Cohn has been an innovator in the area of design automation for both analog and digital custom integrated circuits, not circuses. Cohn has more than 50 patents issued or pending in the field of design automation, methodology, and circuits. Dr. Cohn has authored more than 30 technical papers and has contributed to 4 books on design automation. So the question that I'm sure is on the lips of all the designers watching tonight, what is design automation? Could you define that for those of us who attended art school?
Well, you recognize the first word, right? Design?
Yeah, I hear that.
Well, it's just like that, only not as cool. No, actually, it's really beautiful, Ryan. What we do, so I work on the chips that are inside IBM's big computers, but more than just the big computers. You guys like to play video games, right? That's how you get
Some of us do, yeah, we do.
Yeah, well, actually, I worked on the processors for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Wii. So my group helps make those chips that are inside IBM's biggest computers and all 3 of those game platforms. And believe it or not, putting together those chips is like a real artistic design kind of thing. Everything, the last chip we made for a large IBM computer had 3.2 billion transistors, and every one of them had to be right when it was shipped. And that's too much for a human, even a smart human, to like get into their noggin. So we use computer programs, special, weird, particularly difficult to use computer programs, particularly designed to be difficult to use, that figures out where all of those little switches, each transistor is a little 1 and 0 switch, where do they all have to be? How do you hook them up so that they're close enough so that the thing can run as fast as it needs to go? I mean, these things go 3 to 5 billion times a second. So I love them. But trying to figure out where they need to go once they're placed on a chip so that they're not overlapping. How fast will it go? How much power will it take? Does it do the right thing? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is a whole bunch of specialized software, and my group writes that specialized software. It's like you know CAD programs. You guys use like things like Maya or stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, only much more expensive and much less fun to use. Must be
IBM's calling. You're revealing secrets you're not allowed to tell. A man in a dark suit will come to displace you soon.
Yeah, no, they look more like me.
So that many components on a small chip like that, is that something that would cross over into nanotechnology at this point? I mean, that's a word we hear thrown around a lot, and that we don't completely understand.
It crosses over into madness. No, it's nanotechnology is what we call anything we can't do quite yet.
Okay.
It is actually the little transistors that we make. They're so cute, I tell you, Ryan. Each one is like, right now we're designing in 32 nanometers. So that's a nanometer is a billionth of a meter, so 32 billionths of a meter.
Wow.
I mean, that's can't do the math. I'm not very good at math. Like 1/30,000th of a human hair. Get that?
I was just going to ask, is it thinner than a piece of paper?
Oh man. Oh, here's this. Here's a nanometer. A nanometer. It's hard to get, a billionth of a. So you and I, before we went on, we're talking about beards. This is National Grow a Really Gnarly Beard Month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. You're looking pretty good there. A nanometer is how long it takes if you reach out, grab your razor, and you pull it to your face, and the time it takes you to do that, your beard grows a nanometer. So there.
What?
Yeah.
That's hard to even fathom. That's hard to even grasp that your beard is moving at that speed.
Well, it's not very fast when you actually think of it, but it sounds good, doesn't it?
It does.
But,
I now have a unit of measurement for my beard growth.
Yeah, nanometer, nanobeard. Yeah, nanometer just means wicked small, as we would say technically.
Yeah.
What's happening? You know what's really cool about chips right now is that everything is falling apart. So I'm getting
How
on
so?
in the air. Well, because are you still there?
Yeah.
Move every once in a while. Oh, just keep blinking because I worry about you. Oh, that's good. What happens is for the last 40 years, I've been in the business for about 28 years, and for the last 40 years, chips have been getting faster, and twice as fast, and 4 times as dense every 3 years, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I made an analogy. I was giving a talk last week in California. I figured that if airplane speeds had gone, in that same 40 years had advanced that fast, it would take 1 second to go from New York to LA. And I can tell you it's not. So things have gotten much faster. Everything's gotten faster and everything's gotten more packed. And what that's allowed us to do is write crappier and crappier code. The fact that like, am I allowed to say Microsoft here?
Sure, that's allowed.
Okay. Well, if you think about things like Windows gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they aren't, we write bloat code too. So, you write bigger and bigger code because the next generation computers are going to be faster. Well, it ain't happening anymore. Everything, because of a combination of physics and economics, the next generation chips aren't going faster. We're still going to get smaller, still get little and tinier, but they aren't getting faster. It has to do with how much power you can get out of them and how many atoms there are to push around. I mean, these things are really, really small. I mean, the gate, the little things that turn the things on and off are separated by only about 10 atomic levels, so you can't really go much lower than that because nature starts to act kind of funky when you don't know if it's
So is that why we're hearing about more and more cores, like a quad-core, multi-core processors? Because that way they're not going faster, there's just more of them doing more data processing.
Give that man a job. It's exactly what we're doing. It's because each single core can't go much faster. We're having to divide the work, and so eventually 1,000 chickens will equal one giant, elephant or something. But unfortunately, even that falls apart because there's the, 7 pounds of excrement in the 5-pound bag. Eventually, you have more work than you can cool. So
Okay.
it's how much stuff you can cool before you run out of volume. And the problem with that is, you can cut it a bunch of different ways. Companies like mine and our competitors like Intel are doing a good job at trying to toe the line, more cores, etc. But eventually, it is breaking down. People are going to have to write software differently. Expectations are going to have to change. But ultimately, what's going to happen is that this 40-year run of silicon that everything is based on is going to fall apart. And I'm kind of an anarchist, and I like that because that means that we're going to have to invent new cool stuff. And that's what we basically call nanotechnology. So instead of everything being based on silicon, I'm guessing in 7 to 10 years, which is not going to be quite soon enough, but we'll be switching to systems that are based more on like carbon fibers or something like that. The transistors will be little tiny threads, microscopic threads. I mean, really, really, really tiny carbon threads that are actually about 10 times more conductive than the transistors we're using. there's just some really cool properties. But the world is going to have to relearn how to make, billions of these things. We don't know how to make three transistors together out of carbon right now. So we're going to have to get pretty darn smart in the next, somewhere in the next 10 years, because silicon is...
So when do we get to the point where computers are like liquid metal, like in Terminator?
About 4 years ago, but we just don't talk
4
about
years
it.
ago. That happened, just we don't know about it?
That's right.
So you got to know some serious stuff that regular people aren't allowed to know.
I could tell you, but I have to track you all down and kill you, and that's what's much harder in a virtual world,
It is, it is.
There is some really cool stuff happening, and at our company and other companies, universities around the world, it's a really cool time. I really think about that, and the fact that it's been changing so much. I mean, how many other industries changed that radically? I mean, has design changed? I mean, I'm not to diss anybody else. It's just, it's always like we're always in a crisis. That's why I look like this.
Well, it's the technology that affects all these other industries. So because technology has changed, the tools that designers use to do their job have changed dramatically over the last handful of decades, and that's constantly evolving. And that's one of the things we talk about a lot, is how to keep up with those tools. And sometimes the question is, how well do you really want to learn the tool? Because once you learn the tool, you're limited by what that tool can do. So as opposed to just learning the tool really well, you can just concentrate on the philosophy of design and make whatever you think of happen, rather than just working within the limits of your tools.
I know exactly what you're saying. We work with that all the time. Is sometimes we're always in this weird dialogue with colleges. I'm sure design's in the same place, because it's been a field that's completely been revolutionized by computers, at least as I understand it, right? I mean,
very much so.
People still, yeah. Well, we wrestle with universities. Sometimes even people in my field don't agree, but since I outrank most of them, I get to choose twice. I get to vote twice. But I would much rather have somebody who could think critically and understood the underlying process and like the goal, and then could kind of fight their way through a tool, than somebody who knew exactly which button to press. Because the stuff in our business, the stuff is obsolete in 3 years by definition. You know that the next generation thing. Right now we're on this weird curve that we struggle like crazy. Can I say like hell? Is this a G-rated or a...
This is a G-rated, but that's okay.
Okay, we struggle, but I can't say like we struggle like shit.
No,
like hell?
that's a negative.
Okay, all right.
That'll be bleeped
like
during the iTunes chat.
We struggle like hell. Oh, sorry about that. We struggle like hell to try to build a computer that's powerful enough to design the next computer. Isn't that weird? Like, if we don't get the computer that we're working on now done in time, our next computer will be late because we can't process all of the verification and stuff. It's getting a little less so like that now because of the multi-core thing that we just talked about. But it is that kind of weird treadmill. And because of that, exactly as you said, is the next generation tools are, they have to be revamped so often because of the capacity. Four times as many things every 3 years. That's a lot.
So we were talking about gaming chips earlier, and I would imagine you were telling me earlier today that you don't own a TV really at home, and I would imagine then there probably aren't many games being played at the household, well, and you don't see much of that, right?
No, be careful. I don't have TV hooked up to the outside. We do have a TV that is hooked up. I'm not allowed to choose favorites, but one of our esteemed customers, we have a... Can I say that? Yeah, I can say. I have an Xbox 360. My kids are glued to it, and I am a very poor gamer. I was very proud on Guitar Hero the other day to get through Anarchy in the UK at baby level, but note for note. So it's and you can just look at me, imagine me playing Anarchy in the UK. It's kind of gross, like watching your parents dance. It's not a pretty sight. But I love the fact that I know the chip that's in there. I help make it work and helped unscrew it up at one point, and I'm very proud of that. Very, very proud of that.
That's awesome. And in relation to design field, if anybody follows anything about what's going on with computer sales right now, the majority of computer sales are down, and the majority of computers that are out there right now are their netbooks are popular. They're low processing machines that are meant to just surf the web and send email and do things in the cloud. But on the opposite side of that, Apple is doing very well, and they're selling very expensive machines that can process much larger amounts of data. And of course, the majority of the design world, that's what we're attached to in order to do our job and do our, 1,000 megabyte, gigabyte Photoshop, layered Photoshop files. We have to have access to these machines, and there's a lot of processor power in there. And unless you're constantly updating those machines and taking care of those machines, you're in trouble. So we do have a strong relationship here that you're keeping a large industry afloat.
Though and we intend to keep doing that, but I would say that in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see the effect of this. The whole compute model is going to have to change somewhat, because we will not be able to no one will be able to keep pumping, as much performance increase in, say, a laptop or a desktop thing. You'll see lots of interesting things happening. You'll see more distributed computing. You'll see the bandwidth, being taxed more. But when you have optical bandwidth, some of the preconceptions about how much you can move data around are changed. The latency that we think about, how long it takes to pump something down a little thin wire, we'll have some relief there. But by and large, we're going to end up doing processing in distributed ways, through the network. The device.
So what that means, to make sure I'm understanding correctly, what that means is that some of the processing power that we're going to be using won't be on our local machine. It'll be on some other server somewhere. It could be in, India or China or wherever, Michigan or Wisconsin, doesn't matter.
Right. That's the whole idea of cloud. And the question is, can you hide the latency? Can you divide the work in such a way that the fact that the speed of light is only as fast as it is doesn't get in the way? But, I think we're going to end up getting more clever. What we've been able to do is rely on brute force of things getting faster to make things go faster. But now we're going to have to just, rely on our brains. It's not going to all of a sudden fall apart. But this nanotechnological stuff, this nanotechnology can't come soon enough, because eventually we're going to all start looking a little bit shabby.
So do you think that another barrier that we're going to have to cross before that can start happening maybe in the design world is that people are going to have to be comfortable with their data isn't going to be hosted locally, that it's going to be hosted somewhere else? And then that brings up questions of security and who can see that data and how you get access to it and how it's transferred. How do you think those questions are going to be answered?
Succinctly and perfectly. I just don't know what the answers are. No, actually, if you think about it, there's pros and cons. I mean, I used to be a hacker, and so that's one of the first things that I would think of.
You used to be a hacker? No, we need to back up and address that.
How many people? Let me see the list of who's on here. Well, when I was in high school, I enjoyed the telephone company, let's just say. And,
so was it like the stories we hear about Steve Jobs where they figured out how to get phone calls for free by putting in certain dial tones?
The Wozniak.
Or was it Wozniak?
Yeah.
Do you know Wozniak? And you're not saying anything more, are you? All of a sudden he's gone mute. We have a mute design chat tonight. Great.
But it was good training. But you're on the right point, is that
right.
You're going to have to get used to your data being not in your own house. On the other hand, there's advantages. Your data will be replicated many different places. So it would be safe from an accident or an on-purpose type thing. The latency can be optimized. There's a lot of things that could actually happen. Your incremental cost of increasing your storage will be less. It's a matter, you have to be flexible. I mean, you design guys, you showed me that you were totally flexible. Styles change and everything. That'll be the least of your worries, let me tell you.
So,
be worried about how much you pay for gasoline.
Right. There's so many of those questions too.
No, I think it'll be okay. I definitely am not sitting before you here saying, it's going to be terrible, because I absolutely believe in innovation, and I think we're just going to have to, it'll sort out in a different way. It will be amazing, though. And I think it's going to be, I always think this, but I think right now it's going to be, there's going to be Well, you and I were talking about my word last night in my blog. I blog every night. And I found this great new word, interregnum. We are about to enter the silicon interregnum, where the technology that's basically by that end point will have lasted half a century will go obsolete and something else will have to take over. It'll be cataclysmic and amazingly cool and amazingly fun. So anyway,
guess who just popped into the chat? I just saw. Sorry to interrupt, but PR Sarah Evans is here. Hi, Sarah. How you doing? Thanks for coming out. Also a friend from another speaker from CUSP conference.
He went as slow to Halloween, and it really was a pretty convincing costume. I like it, sir.
I didn't see the photos. I'll have to catch up with that. Speaking of amazing, chief scientist of design automation, what is the daily life of a chief scientist at IBM?
Well, I get to wear a funny hat. It's it's funny. It's a mixed blessing. I really love my work, and I love my company. We've got, and they're not paying me to say that. I think it's, I get to work with a really wide range of people all over the place, and so the good side is I've got a lot of influence. I can, work with a lot of smart people all over the world. I used, when the economy is better, I'm traveling all over the world all the time. The downside, I think, is I don't get to mess around with my hands, which is why, like the TV show was so much fun. So my life is probably 60% conference calls with people around the world, 20% thinking. How much is that? 10% beating my head against the wall because of the mindless bureaucracy of a large company, even though I love it, and 10% just goofing off, but don't tell anybody.
The goofing off is necessary and encouraged sometimes because that helps innovation. That helps you come up with ideas you wouldn't come up with normally.
You said that like a grown-up. That's true.
Well, I'm trying to convince myself and my bosses at the same time, so it's got to come out that way.
No, I totally agree with that. And actually, I really enjoyed my most.
So you mentioned just a second ago the show, The Colony. Recently, John, if you're not familiar, John was a cast member on the Discovery Channel's reality show, The Colony. It was a controlled experiment to see exactly what it would take to survive and rebuild after a global catastrophe. So for 10 weeks, they had to survive with no electricity, no running water, and no communication with the outside world. The first question I have about that is the most obvious one. What was that like? Because we go from a time that we are super connected to everything where you got shut off from everything. Was there a shock involved in that?
It was like this. It was totally great. As we were talking earlier today, I grew up on punch cards, man. So, I've come to all of this. I'm now a Twitter fanatic, and I, have close to, 1,400 Facebook friends. And
what's your Twitter handle, by the way? I was looking for that earlier today.
John Cohn VT.
John Cohn VT.
Yeah. I don't Twitter a lot. I mostly just echo my Facebook status. But I have learned to love it and sort of voyeuristically lurk all over the place. Be careful what you write. But the interesting thing is, in BlackBerry and always on the phone, it was bliss to be unplugged. And, you talk about goofing off being a really nice way of spurring creativity. I missed it. I missed being connected for maybe a day and a half, maybe 3 days. And really, ultimately, the only thing I missed talking to family. I didn't miss anything. I never missed a computer. I actually managed to break into a computer network while I was on the show. But
get out of town. Was that out? Did that air?
No. It was never on. As a matter of fact, they dared me to, and I figured out how to. And but I turned myself in because I didn't. Part of the show was getting into the mindset and really buying into the fact that what. I quickly found out that everyone in Los Angeles wasn't dead. We had to, but you really had to get into the mindset to be able to play the game. It was really like an advanced game, and it wouldn't have been fun if you'd been able to get emails and read newspapers and stuff. It was incredibly refreshing, calming. I was just out there last week, and I was staying with one of my friends, one of the other cast members, the doctor, George, and we were talking about, it was, in one ways it was incredibly stressful, physically stressful. We were not eating, we were dehydrated, filthy beyond words. We were, being stressed by these kind of fake bad guys, but they were truly waking us up most nights, not most, but, every other night or so at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we were pretty stressed out, but even so, we were saying to each other that, I don't think I've ever been that relaxed. I worked with my hands all day. I went to bed 11 o'clock or so, or midnight, exhausted, knowing what I'd accomplished. Slept. We were sleeping on pallets and cardboard. 5 of us in one bed, 4 in the other for a while. And I've never slept better. I've never been more stress-free. And I think a lot of it is being unplugged.
Right.
And the other thing that was really cool was just, I mentioned my day job doesn't always give me enough time to work with my hands. It really threw me back to 1970s or 60s technology, and I really had to relearn a lot of stuff. But it was so cool working with your hands.
So what would you say that you learned would be the most important thing that someone would have to do? Say a real catastrophe happens, and there's little time to react and make sure that you have everything you need. What would be the first action? Say a real catastrophe hits your city. What are the first actions that you take?
Well, if my experience was any example, I would sort of riff on Douglas Adams and say, pick up a plastic sheet. And the reason for that is about 3 or 4 days in, we got our first real rainfall, one of 3, and we were filthy. We were really filthy. And everybody seemed to be occupied with trying to go suck up water in the front, and I just said, I need a shower. So I ripped my clothes off, ran outside, thinking nobody saw me. I was just in the rain, looking at, all of a sudden I turned around, there's the camera.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you wouldn't put this on TV. And they said, oh, no. And then I realized I'm just standing there completely naked. So I picked up a plastic sheet. Last 45 seconds of the first show, there I was. Luckily, I was pixelated from behind and I had that plastic sheet. So I would say always carry a plastic sheet. Duct tape and plastic was really good. What would I do? You're asking a serious question. I would stay calm. I would trust in your own ingenuity. I would find a can opener, find all the canned food you could get. And I think I would, even though we didn't have it, I hate to say it, but I think I'd probably find a weapon. I'm a real pacifist, and it was uncomfortable. It was all a fake scenario, but
right.
They made us read The Road and watch every zombie movie that's ever been made. And much as I am a pacifist, I do think that these kind of disasters bring out some weird elements, and you would have to protect yourself. I hate to say that.
We'd be reversed back to a very different time that the U.S. or many other some countries are dealing with right now, and people in the U.S. just wouldn't see that as a reality until it happened to them, and by that point it's too late.
Yeah, I think as a neurotic Jewish guy from Beatific, Vermont, it wasn't something that I really thought I was going to ever have to deal with.
Yeah.
On the other hand, my overall takeaway from it was just incredibly positive in that I really believe that people are incredibly inventive, and when I think about it was a little bit of social experiment. It was half social experiment, half science, building show. And when you put 10 people in a jar and you shake it, there's a lot of friction and stuff. But ultimately, I was really amazed how well people pulled together and how well people worked together and how much fun we had. So I actually think in a real disaster, you'd be shell shocked. We were, they really kept us stressed. So in some ways, that part, certainly the first 2 weeks, really felt like you'd gone through something. You never knew what was real and what was wrong, and we knew at some deep level we weren't going to get hurt or anything.
Right.
You were always getting tested and attacked and disturbed and.
So you're a very technical guy. You've learned how to build things with your hands. You were doing that at an early age. You were saying, what would you say are sort of technical skills that someone should develop or something? You know, just basic things that you should know how to do in that type of situation.
You know what? Let's see. So just sort of basic skills that I thought were really important.
Yeah.
First aid, absolutely. Learn first aid, and including, the aspects of preventative first aid. How much water you need, how to prevent infection, how to set bones, things like that. Definitely do that. I would learn knot tying. We did a lot of having to, improvise structures, improvise protection. I think that would be very important. I'm trying to think of a real scenario. The kinds of things that were very helpful in our scenario was learning how to build and make and adapt things. Take parts of one thing and make something else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's something that you study for or learn, but I found that that kind of ingenuity, creative thinking, to the extent that you can bring something like that with you, that was very handy. I mean, we, for example, found it very useful to weld. But you may not be so lucky as to find that such a well-stocked larder as we had. But I think keeping your wits about you, I would also make sure that you write down. It became very important for us to catalog and chronicle what we were doing, both to keep track of what we did and remember stuff that we had done, but also it's been incredibly valuable since we came out, just to sort of go back and relive it. And
I've always wondered if duct tape would prove to be the total necessary tool in that situation.
I think we went through about 40 rolls, and the place would not have been. I don't consider it a building material, but we went through so much. We made it into shoes. We made it into underwear. We made it into shields. We made it into a weather balloon. Let's see, what else?
So it sounds like my theory is proven then. I mean, it's applicable to so many different situations.
Oh, things that are wood, duct tape, aluminum foil, paper towels. Oh, you know what the thing we missed the most was toilet paper. Bring lots of paper when they drop the big one.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Duct tape and toilet paper.
And you would think, oh well, they would make some sort of accommodations, but they were pretty funny what they would allow us and what they would not. And when we would run out of something, we ran out of it. Not to put too fine a point on it.
So now that the show is kind of run its course and it's still re-airing and stuff, I'm sure there are times where you get recognized when you go out in public to the airport, maybe maybe in your own town or something like that. This question is sort of twofold, because we're also living in a time where it's cool again to be involved in math and science, because of how many things are happening so quickly in design and technology right now. And there was that Intel commercial that you might not have seen, the Rockstar one, where it shows the guy walking in slow motion, and it has a little caption of him being the inventor of the USB, and everybody in the office, girls are screaming like he's a rock star, and he's like, our rock stars are different from yours. And there was like Intel, bum, 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 and all these people. And I think we're living in a really cool time where, there is a lot of truth to that, where if you're the man, you're the man, and you are the man.
I absolutely, it's funny because I am, like most engineers, I'm kind of a shy person inside, and I didn't really think through the fame part, and it hasn't been, it's like a 15-minute thing, right? The thing has run its course, but I get ID'd all the time, especially in cities, and it's usually, people, 30s and under, and I really like it because I love talking about the show, but it's also been kind of weird and creepy.
Yeah.
But the thing so that part's been fun because I like talking about it. But the thing that's been really cool, Ryan, is that I've heard from so many kids. My whole shtick for doing this was that I really like making science fun for people.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I necessarily want them to be scientists or engineers, so that's good too, but I just think it's like music or poetry. People can dig it. And I've heard from so many kids and parents and teachers about it. And it's funny because when I look at the show, I think, well, the science is done kind of, pretty quick and awfully convenient and stuff. but I guess it got people talking and thinking about it. And I'm so jazzed by that.
Right.
And I'm giving lots of talks now about, the experience, what it was like. And I often hear that. What you just said was really pretty cool, which is that it's kind of chic to be a geek again. And
Yeah.
I actually, just to sort of my dharma, my mission right now is to try to get more kids interested. And I think that actually we're entering a time, again, it's going to be kind of a difficult time for a while, but I think as our gap, dependence on fossil fuels changes, and just the economics and politics, and whether you believe in climate warming or anything else, something is going to have to snap. And in the next couple of years, next 5-10 years, something really, really fundamental is going to change in the way that we use energy.
Yeah.
And that is going to be such a cool time to be in one of these engineering fields, either a geek like me, or computers, or environmental engineers, or civil. And so I really want exactly what you're saying is, I want people to go, I want people to think, oh, I could do that, or that would be fun.
And it's very evident. If anybody does a quick search on you, how much you followed up on that, and that you have this show called Jolts and Volts, and you take it around, you educate, to different schools, and you've done it at the FCOP Center, and you're also educating on the higher level too. And it's very obvious that this is something you're extremely passionate about. There's a lot of debate, about the American school system and how the rankings have slipped versus other countries. And, I was wondering what sort of your vision was for where we are in that, and what can be done to help the younger children right now to catch up to these other countries in math and science.
Well, you know what? I'm going to say something uncharacteristic. I don't think we're behind. I was just reading some articles about that. I think also, I don't think that kind of crisis mentality, I know I said crisis a couple of seconds ago, but I don't think there's anything really wrong with our education system. Teachers work really hard. I think the problem is, you and I were talking about this, and I was talking about this at the conference, the CUSP conference. I think what turns me more is it's about who's going into engineering and how many people are even being trained as engineers and going off and doing something else.
Right.
You look at it, only 20 some odd %, low 20s are women in engineering. Similar things if you look at any kind of, any axis of diversity, ethnic, religious, whatever. Engineers, with a few exceptions, are not getting their representative share of a diverse group of people. And I don't think that's just, politically correct. I think what happens is we've pigeonholed ourselves. And I think it's a design problem. You guys are all designers. You can help me with this. I think we've got this great product. I think engineering is wonderful. We do a lot of good with the world. But if you ask people, if you ask kids, I remember I showed it to us, if you went and you asked people, they've asked thousands of people, do they think engineers make good money? And they'll say, yeah. And then you ask them, do you think they help the world? They'll say, nah, not really. Maybe, a couple of them will say. Or do they care about the climate? No. But if you ask the same thing about scientists, they say, yeah, scientists care. And so engineers are getting this bad rap. And I think it's a design problem. We've got a good product, bad packaging. And what I think we need to do is it's not so much worried about, whether our math scores are up to Singapore's or anything like that. Because I think well, first of all, I think it's okay if the rest of the world catches up. I work for a company, International Business Machine. I think of myself as a international person. So I don't really think of it as U.S. versus anywhere else. But I think if you do restrict your view, if you think about this country, I don't think it's that we're generating bad engineers or that kids are not getting enough math and science so much. I think it's that we're not teaching them about the fun parts. And I wonder if the same is in designs. You think about design. If you go out and you ask, there was there was a survey that asked worldwide, actually, 400,000 kids what they thought of engineering, among other things. And they said there was 3 messages that came up. And it was that you have to be good at math and science. It's hard. And it's not for everyone. Right. How's that for a brand? Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's like selling broccoli. I mean, if you said like you're a doctor and you said, okay, you have to clean, smell people up that you have to poke them and make them hurt, and you have to change bedpans and work really late. That's not really what you think. You think of doctors, they're compassionate, they drive fancy cars. You know, we have a brand problem because nobody in those messages, you know, good at math and science, hard, not for everyone. You never hear anything about the creative aspect of engineering, because engineering is only, it's only about being creative. Nobody, you know, in the real world, we teach math and science like you're supposed to get the right answer. You know, like somewhere there's a big book and you open it up and there's the right answer. And
Yeah.
no, engineering problems are trying to solve problems that nobody's ever solved before. So it's all about creativity. It's also about, you know, compassion, you know, for what happens in the world, and, you know, passion for stuff. And yet that message doesn't come across.
Well, you bring up this at an interesting time, because like we were talking about earlier, with the ability that everybody has now to be their own broadcaster on, you know, Twitter, or get a little closer, people like you can get close to the audience and tell them all about engineering. And now people have control over that, where it used to be a one-way thing where only certain groups of people had the privilege of putting out information. Now you, as a spokesperson for engineering, can take hold of your Twitter account, take hold of your following, and tell people what engineering is really like. And so this is a very powerful time for many different industries where we can talk to everybody. You know, this never happened before. Design is a similar thing. You're not going to get the same answers that people would answer about engineering. You get a lot more questions. What's design? What kind of job do I get with design? You know, am I going to be a starving artist? You know, am I just going to be designing band posters for the rest of my life? But the truth is, not everybody really knows, and this is a time where things like DesignChat, we're getting it out to everybody, what design is and how you can apply it.
I love that, you know, and I really, you know, I've talked to you about it. I've talked to a couple of people. CUSP was a really interesting, that conference was a really good turning point because I made some good connections.
Yeah.
I'm actively looking for help, anybody who's out there, in how we get that message out. I mean, there's a generational thing. I mean, look, face it, you know, old white guy, right? You know, this is what people think of what an engineer is like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, independent of the fact that I ate wraps on national TV. That doesn't count. I'm grandpa. What you need to figure out, I need to figure out, how do we get that message out there in a way that's consumable by kids? And, you know, most importantly, it must be the same thing in design. You can't tell somebody something that isn't true. They'll see right through it. So
Yeah.
how do we make sure it's true? How do we make sure that, you know, that what we're selling them isn't crap? You know, how do we make the field the compassionate, creative, you know, encompassing thing that it needs to be, because to solve the world's problems? I know I sound like, you know, maybe too much of a Boy Scout with that, but I really believe that.
No, not at all, because then you're hitting the nail on the head, because how that's going to happen are people like you.
And get it out there. So I'm looking for all the help I can. I understand that you guys have similar, you know, I love the fact that these two designed, you know, our two disciplines are crossing, because I think that there's amazing things we could do for each other.
Very much so.
Don't you think that?
Very much so. And on the point you were talking about earlier, how the public perspective is going to change, is that the reality of, can you not hear me?
Are you still alive?
I'm still here. Can you not hear me?
Still moving. Ryan.
Hello, hello, hello.
Can you hear me?
Is my audio still in, everybody?
Okay. Well, you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can still hear you fine.
Still hear me? Thumbs up,
yep.
Ryan, can you hear me?
Give him a thumbs up, maybe.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
You're
We
moving
can't hear you.
very slowly. Wait, that's looking better. Say something.
Okay, hello, hello, hello. Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. Are you a rip leader?
Are we still good?
Lip reader? I can hear you fine. I'll type it in. I can hear
Needs to reboot.
John fine. I think, John, you need to reboot. If you can hear me. John, reboot.
Anybody know anything?
Refresh. Refresh your browser, please. And in the meantime, everybody go ahead and keep on throwing your questions out there to John, because if you missed the earlier part, we will harvest those questions, and we're very near the point here. We're going to serve those questions back up to John. Admin, that's a bad question. And yeah, I can still hear you, John. Can you hear me?
I'm gonna go on the chat.
And we will harvest those questions and we will serve them back up to
Guys?
John as soon as he gets back up online. I think I hear him talking still.
Can you guys hear me? Somebody say
Everybody say yes, John. We can hear you.
Hey, wait, I can see you now.
Hello.
Ryan, can you talk?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Talk.
Hello, 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 John.
Ah, my headset.
Your headset went out. You said that might happen.
Okay,
That's why.
hang on one sec.
Okay. So for a couple other announcements while we're waiting, all of the
Can you talk?
hello, John.
Ryan?
Hello, John. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can still hear you
Ryan?
fine. You need to get your audio fixed. So if you want to see any older episodes of DesignChat, go to designchat.mevio.com. All the episodes are going to be hosted there from now on, and also that will be reflected on our website, designchat.info, very soon, hopefully this week. And by Saturday, we are applying for iTunes podcasting, so hopefully the process will move along quickly, and you can download these at your leisure at any time through the iTunes store. So also check on our site, designchat.info/guests, to see all of our upcoming guests in the future. Next week, we are scheduled to be talking to Aaron Dignan of Undercurrent in New York. Very interesting fellow, and also a CUSP conference speaker. I'll tell you what, I owe some automation a lot because I made out like a bandit making connections at CUSP conference. Lots of cool people talking about design there. If you're not familiar with Aaron Dignan, he's very tapped into social media and how that works and new ways of designing communication and helping out major brands do that. So he's going to be very cool. Check him out. On Twitter, he's at Aaron Dignan. So how we doing, John? Oh, John. John is now no longer broadcasting, so we'll hang out a couple minutes.
Wait. Hey!
Oh my
How did that happen? How did that
turn
happen?
down your volume on your sensitivity? You're very loud right now.
I have to be insensitive. Yeah,
That's better. Yeah. Can you be less sensitive, please?
Engineers
Oh my
don't
goodness.
have sensitivity. Hey, so what happened? I could see you. I could see me moving. I could see you moving occasionally. Could you hear me at all?
I heard you perfectly the whole time. I think you hit a nail on the head that your earpiece died, and
No,
you were
but
just not getting the sound.
No, well that might have happened, but also my browser must have frozen.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm glad you're back. I'm glad I'm moving. Can you see me moving?
Yeah, not very articulately. Here.
I don't do that. I don't dance. Oh, look at you doing the wave. Do you do the Google wave?
No.
No.
All right. I'm sorry. So
That's okay. So we were just talking about how cool it is where our industries are sort of crossing over. I've got a couple more notes to get through with you before we go into the Q&A.
Sure.
So jolts and bolts we talked about. I'm going to pronounce the word wrong. The word you blogged about the other night, interregnum.
Yeah, I think that's a great word.
Interregnum means a period of discontinuity of a government organization or a social order. Easy for me to say. So, so you heard that at USC, and that's describing the transition between old media and new media. Like you were talking about earlier, a bunch of old technologies are dying, and we're finding new ways to communicate and adapt. And that's something you just had to deal with is how to adapt to, if something's taken away from you, how do you move on? And you tapped into an interesting subject earlier with fuel, and we're going to find ourselves at a juncture where gasoline isn't going to do it for us anymore, and we're going to have to find new ways of using energy. What do you think is the most exciting thing happening in energy right now?
Well, you know what I think is interesting is that, have you ever heard of the book Generations by Neil Howe and William Strauss?
No, I know Neil Strauss though.
They have a series of books called Millennials Rising and Generations, and they have a really interesting theory about intergenerational dynamics. And So how old are you? Can I ask you that? Are you in your
I am
30s?
32 years of age.
That is amazing. I remember that. Well, it means that, see, my generation is kind of like at the end of the baby boomers. We're kind of like, we're supposed to be sort of, passive idealist, a lot of nice words, not a lot of nice ideas. The next generation, sort of a little bit younger than you, kind of Generation X, was a little nihilist and just sort of, we had messed up the world so much, you're going to just hang out for yourselves. This is all terrible generalizations, I know. But the authors say that the next generation, the generation that are like my kids' age, are finally going to get tired of both of us, your age and my age. Your age for kind of like sitting around and going, it's not going to get any better. My generation for saying a lot and not doing anything. And they're going to wipe us out of the way and say, I can't say screw this. They're going to say, they're going to look at, how many times more are we going to see big oil companies with windmills on their ads, or pick up a paper cup that has some green message on it. They're going to say, that's nonsense. And either because of political pressures, economic pressures, or real, climatic crisis, they're just going to sweep that away. And I think it's going to take that to push aside the people of our two generations that have so much at stake in keeping the status quo, keeping the oil economy, the gas economy, big cars and everything. There's a lot of, it's not that any individual is bad, is that there's a lot of economics and a lot of lifestyle things that are wrapped around there. And people aren't going to let go of fossil fuel, either for industry or for personal use, unless there's no choice. Well, what's going to happen in the next 10, 15 years is my prediction. There will be no choice. And I think it will be mostly, my guess is it'll be a combination of political and economic things, is that economics will get untenable, and the fact that we don't own all of control of the, the energy resources that we need will become a political issue. There'll be political instability. That's just not a good situation where you need something that you don't own. It makes you do stupid, crazy things. So what'll happen, I think, is that generation will then have come through, will have developed the skills, and the old will be pushed aside because there is no option. So I think that there will be steady progress in the technology until then, but it still won't be the Malcolm Gladwell tipping point where everything has to change. Because it will have to change. It will be an abrupt change because the economics will change, usage patterns will have to change. And, I hate to say this, I'm a conservationist and everything else, but, you can turn off all the light bulbs you want. If you don't change heavy industry and you don't change the way that nations use power, it doesn't matter how many Priuses. Prii? I drive a Prius. What's the plural of Prius? How many of those you buy and everything? It's got to be a wholesale, both, a change in the technology and a change in the usage patterns and change in the policies.
Yeah.
And it isn't going to happen smoothly. It may not be violent. I don't mean that.
Right.
But it's going to be very abrupt. And we are in that interregnum. I hadn't even applied that word to anything serious, but we're in that point where the old is still working and has a lot of, a lot of life left in it, but people can see the end. And when people see the end of their own personal fortunes and their control and stuff like that, crazy things are going to start happening.
Right.
But I'm an optimist. I think in the end it'll be for the good. And I think that the world that comes out of it, I believe that we're very resilient. I don't think we're going to wipe ourselves off the planet or anything like that. But I think that there's going to be some tough times, at least at an individual level, and I think probably at nations level, until we get this right.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed. I think we're now at the point tonight where we're going to transition to questions that were submitted by the audience. So we have been harvesting those this whole time. So the first question I'm going to throw out there is from Shampton Alive, who asks, do you believe that form follows function, and what are your thoughts on design and its role in technology?
Is this where I'm supposed to pull Marshall McLuhan out from behind here?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Do you have him in the way? Because that'd be rad if you just brought him out today.
Who would I do for design? I would bring one of those great speakers that we had at CUSP. I do believe that, let's see if I can remember exactly, form follows function. Well, actually, I think that form always followed function I think engineering is in an interesting transition, an interregnum as it were, that we're in a place where, technology was coming at us at such a pace that new and different was good enough. I think with the fact that we've got, if you there's a great book, Daniel Pink, A Whole New Mind, where he talks about the rising importance of design in engineering. And the reason is you get a more global workforce, you get commoditization in things like, handheld gadgets, that what differentiates one from another is design. I mean, look at an iPhone, look at or touch, or look at a Prius, or look at any of those gadgets, that the actual componentry in those things is nothing. I mean, they cost nothing to build, and you could practically give them away, because what they really are is a portal into a back office music selling machine. But what makes that bag of parts better than, say, their competitors, and I shouldn't list those, is design, purely design. It's appealing to see, appealing to use, and I believe that that's true in everything. I mean, we take a great deal of care in the industrial design of our products. There's a great story. We have one of the most beautiful pieces of industrial design that I know of is one of our supercomputers called Blue Gene. It's a 10 million, it's multi-tens of $1,000,000 computer. It's used in very specialized things like simulating earthquakes or simulating nuclear weapons, so you don't have to actually fire them. And they did such a beautiful piece of industrial design. As it turns out, that the whole case has to be canted this way to facilitate the airflow to get this thing cooled. But aesthetically, that was unpleasing. So they liked the fact that it was leaning, but they actually leaned the cases as if they were leaning into a stiff wind quite a bit more, because it was aesthetically more pleasing. And the whole thing just looks like a flowing wave. This is a machine that that we build 10 of them or something. I don't know how many we build, but tens of them, not very many. And you have to shell out big bucks. And so nobody really cares about the design, but the people took such pride in this, and they knew it was a beautiful thing inside. They wanted to make it beautiful outside. I think more and more design is going to be the differentiator, especially when you get into a situation of commoditization and labor is cheap and componentry is cheap. That the only thing that sets things apart is how appealing they are and how beautiful they are and how much you love to use them. So I think that it's a great coming together of these industries. Do you call yourself an industry or an art?
Definitely. Well, it's a little of both, and there are arguments that people make for both sides. But the designers are involved in so many different industries, it's kind of hard to say that it's all just one. The next question was talking a little bit about design from Patrick. He asks, how practical are chips and systems fully submersed in oil for cooling?
Well, that's kind of a cool idea. We've used all sorts of things for cooling, and oil, circulating oils have been used. Turns out that water is pretty good. We use various gases. Our big machines now have really interesting, complicated systems of spring-loaded pistons that have chilled helium in them. We have flowing water. So you can use just about any liquid, but water has a pretty good mix of good thermal capabilities and cheap and environmentally friendly. One of the things that's really exciting is we're now entering a time where we're starting to say, well, the world spends an awful lot of power on computing. There was one statistics, if I believe this, that says that all of our managed hosting, that IBM does for computers for people around the world, takes about as much electricity as Connecticut. Think about that. So, but now all of those bits flipping around in there, they're generating heat just because of the way that physics makes that work. What if you could use that heat for something? What if it wasn't a waste problem? You're just using, when you use water, oil, gas, Freon, whatever to cool, what you're generally doing is you're just moving the heat somewhere else, and 9 times out of 10 you're just letting it go into the environment. There's been some work in trying to harvest that heat for environmental heating of buildings. I just heard of some projects where we're using that heat, we're actually selling that into communal hot water systems, like a civic hot water system for communal heat, like where all the buildings are heated. It turns out, it may be counterintuitive, but you can use hot water for cooling. Because we're trying to cool things that are, well, left to their own, they would, melt in a second. So, you can use warm water to continue to cool things, especially if you use some thermodynamic tricks. But the idea that you would take all of the heating that was done doing all that compute stuff, and it would go into just heating the houses, it's just another way of generating heat, just like burning coal or something like that.
Brilliant.
Does that make a lot of sense?
It does.
I look at, I live in rural Vermont, and the farmers here have been doing that, the refrigeration units that they use to chill the milk heat their houses and stuff like that. So it only makes sense that you would do that kind of cogeneration. We're also generating. A lot of companies are also creating data centers in places like Iceland where it's carbon neutral because all the energy is geothermal kind of.
We've got time for just a couple more questions here, so I'm going to throw two more at you. The next one is from Qbert. He wants to know, how did the colony change how you think about your work?
That's a really good question, and I'm still sorting that out. I think the one thing that there were a couple things. One thing, at a personal level, it reminded me how much I enjoyed working with my hands, and if you saw the show, I really, really got into it. So it made me realize again why I love engineering so much in a new way. I saw it afresh, But what was really cool from the standpoint of my day job is we did a lot of green engineering on the colony just by virtue of staying alive. We had solar heat, we had solar power, we had to figure out how to generate electricity without, we had no fossil fuel per se, we had to use wood. So we kept having to come up with ways of sort of doing that kind of green engineering. I've come back and I'm spending more and more of my time in something, my company's got this program called Smarter Planet. We're trying to figure out how we can use information technology, computers, to optimize the use of natural resources, etc. So it's turned out, it changed what I was interested in. It added that dimension, and since I've been back from the colony, I've spent more and more time finding out about that. I'm now doing some leadership stuff in that, and I really like it. I really believe that if we get more, we use analytics, we use smart computers to try to figure out where's our power being used, where's it being generated, where's the water need to go, etc. There's so much waste in the system. And many of our distribution systems are, like 100 years old, Ryan, and there's so much waste in them. And the thought of applying compute and algorithmic stuff to that is very cool. So it directly kind of pointed me into a more green kind of area, and that's been really cool.
Oh, that's just totally amazing. I could sit here. We've got people asking in the chat room if we can have you on for another hour, and unfortunately we can't. I would completely love to do that, so maybe we'll have to ask you to come back for another session sometime. But the last question I'm going to get to...
Send me email. Or I'll tell you what, or Facebook or blog. Can I put my blog or Facebook stuff out here? Or is that
we're going to get to that in a second. In sort of in tandem to that is this next question. It came from PR Sarah Evans, who you know very well from the conference. I don't think she's in the room anymore. I think she had to go, but she brought up the subject of Sam Stones. And I think it's a very touching subject, and I love what you've done with that. And so I'll just let you go ahead and tell that whole story.
Yeah, and it's a sad story, folks. So I have three boys. Gabe is my youngest. He's 14. Max is my oldest. He's 21. Our middle son, Sam, died 3 years ago next week in a car accident, a pedestrian accident, while he was on vacation. And that's a really hard thing to go through. Great kid, very musical, very athletic, fun, and we've tried to figure out a way of how do you keep moving in the world, and how do you keep a kid's spirit like that moving in the world? So when Sam first died, what I did is I sandblasted his name. I know it's light's a little harsh here. If I get that, you can see.
There you go.
See his name there, yeah.
Yep.
I sandblasted his name into some rocks, and we really liked those, but that's a mechanically hard thing to do. So we took an imprint of those sandblasted images, and a friend of ours, Jen, a dear friend of ours, is a potter. So we started making these out of clay, and on the back you'll never see that, but there's an imprint
Mm-hmm.
of our website, samstones.org. Sam, S-A-M, Stones, S-T-O-N-E-S.org.
Mm-hmm.
And we started making these, and then there's a little bit of dye in there for the name, just iron oxide, and then we fire them. We've made, God, at this point, 20, 30,000, and then we just give them to people to put wherever. And if you look at samstones.org, there's a click where you can see where are Samstones, and they're everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
North Pole, South Pole, every continent, and we would love, just go there and there's a click that says, send, want some Samstones, and we'll send them to you. And you just put them someplace. You can just put them in your pocket. You can tell us where you put them or not. There's no real object. We don't track where each one of them is. There's no cost. But we just love the fact, and then we get constantly, once a day, twice a day, we'll hear from somebody where they either placed one or found one. Sometimes it's such great stories that we hear when people find them. And, we just want them to pick it up and think about Sam and, possibly find his way to, read about his life. And, in a very direct way, Ryan, that, Sam's death, that's a very difficult thing to go through, as you can imagine. It really changed the course of my life and my family's life, obviously.
Yeah.
For me, I've always been very, all about working with kids. When Sam died, it really made me say, you know what, that's my mission, is to try to make science beautiful to people, especially kids. And that's why I went on the colony, and ultimately that's why I'm here tonight. And it's funny. I can look at this now and say, you know what? I'm doing good with this. I mean, I certainly wouldn't choose to be on this path, but it's been, as an engineer, I just have to look at it and go, it's fascinating.
Right, and what a great design, and what a great way to pay tribute to his life is by putting those out there in the universe and letting other people find them, and then find out his story and your story in turn. And we'll put up the website there again, and everybody should definitely go check that out and see what that's all about and find a way to participate.
Appreciate you asking about that. Yeah,
very much. Yeah, totally. And your blog also. We'll throw that URL up there in a second. What is your? Yeah, I'm not sure I sent it to my DesignChat link. So what is that blog URL again? It's on MySpace.
Yeah, unfortunately, well, I hope there's no MySpace people here. Yeah, I started blogging 3 days after Sam died, and I've not missed. The only nights I've missed actually is when I was on the colony, and actually my wife kept blogging until she joined me on the colony, which is funny. And so it's blog.myspace.com/John Cohn.
Yeah, we just put it in the chat room, so great. Everybody should definitely check that out. It's very touching, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it, I mean, certainly for the first bit, it was really just, how do we continue surviving? And, over the last 3 years, it's been travels and technical geekiness and colony prep, stuff like that. It's been a wonderful connection with people. So I would love to meet people through that. It's been interesting too. You talk about this interregnum for an old, a geezer class person like me to all of a sudden be blogging and Twittering and Facebooking. Yeah, and I wouldn't be doing it if it hadn't been through this journey of Sam's death. Yeah, be cool.
Well, you're definitely going to continue that trend and spread his story and the love for him, and also get to see parts of your life, which is very interesting. I started reading it the other day and just couldn't stop, and it's it's just a cool journey to be able to share, and definitely one of the things we love to talk about here on DesignChat. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. If you're not familiar, this is DesignChat, the best live design discussion on the internet. We do this every week here at mashable.com/chat. You can find out more information about us at designchat.info and follow me on Twitter at Hoopajube and at DesignChat. John, it's been a pleasure and an honor to spend some time with you tonight. The crazy scientist. I'm going to have to send it to Sarah. She loves that. Yeah, it's been so cool, and definitely we'd love to have you on again sometime in the future. You were just a complete joy to chat with.
It's been great, Ryan, and I apologize for the audiovisual stuff, but I've really enjoyed this, and I just want to say to the audience, design people, I really am serious. I think any sort of dialogue between our two industries, and I could really use that help, and it's sort of redesigning our industry or engineering in general. So I really appreciate you being able to do it. I'd love to find a similar forum in my world that we can invite some of you guys. I'll be thinking about that.
That'd be awesome. We'll have to think about that, and I'll send you a shout as soon as this episode is uploaded to Mevio and available on iTunes. So we will be speaking in the near future, John. Thank you so much again for coming out tonight.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Totally
Bye,
fun.
everybody.
You guys, bye.